Welcome back to Northwest Newsweek Year in Review. It was a tragic start to May after a house fire on the KI First Nation claimed a mother and her 4 children aged 6 to 12. As Adam Riley reports, the fire served as another example of the deficit of firefighting capabilities on First Nations and the growing call to address the issue.
The fire broke out in the early morning hours of May 2nd in the community on Big Trout Lake, located 600 kilometers north of Thunder Bay. It claimed the lives of 5 people, 47-year-old Geraldine Chapman, her 6-year-old daughter Shira, and 3 foster children, 12-year-old Angel McKay, 9-year-old Carl Cutfeet, and 7-year-old Haley Chapman. Additionally, 3 people were sent to hospital for smoke inhalation. In a statement, Anishinaabe-Aski Nation Grand Chief Alvin Fiddler called the fire a devastating loss for the community. A spokesperson for the community, Samuel McKay, says the area doesn't have the personnel or equipment to properly combat house fires, and the government isn't taking the steps to relieve the situation.
This is not the first time this has happened in the First Nations community. Even though the need is there, it's not a priority from the funders, like both levels of government, to try and address the lack of fire services in First Nations communities in the north. And if this were in the south, in the municipality, this would be totally unacceptable.
It was determined that all 5 victims died as a result of smoke inhalation. A wake was later held in Sioux Lookout with a funeral in KI First Nation immediately afterward. Prior to the funeral, Kiiwetinoong MPP Saul Mamakwa spoke at Queen's Park, calling for better firefighting equipment and prevention on remote First Nations.
First Nation residents are 10 times more likely to die in a house fire than the rest of Canada. It's not good enough to feel bad. It's not good enough. It's not enough to have those moments of silence. There are actions that could be taken to make events like this less likely.
The member opposite is right. It is more than just about moments of silence and action. It's more about action, Mr. Speaker. That's why we responded to this fire very quickly, reached out to the chief. In fact, resources from the Government of Ontario were mobilized immediately. The chief acknowledged that, and we remain committed to supporting the community.
Ontario's chief coroner has announced a panel that will review 58 deaths of First Nations people who died as a result of fatal house fires between 2007 and 2016. Adam Riley, TBT News.
A suspicious death on Onagaming First Nation north of Fort Frances in early May has led to aggravated assault charges against a Sabaskong First Nation man. On May 7th, the body of 42-year-old Clayton Bob was discovered near a roadway in Onagaming. The accused, 28-year-old Larry Duck, was later arrested and charged. An investigation is ongoing, and the OPP are asking for anyone with more information to come forward. The Ford government plans to reduce the number of health units from 35 down to 10 is raising concerns for some of the region's public health leaders. The plan includes merging the Thunder Bay District Health Unit and the Kenora-based Northwestern Health Unit as one of 2 amalgamated agencies in Northern Ontario. Details on what the merger could look like have not yet been released, but as Carmen Wong reports, some are worrying about what's to come.
Until we really understand the details, it is very challenging times and there is apprehension.
Under proposed new boundaries by the Ford government, the Thunder Bay District Health Unit and the Northwestern Health Unit will become a single regional public health center to serve all of Northwestern Ontario. The merging of 2 units into a single agency raises concerns for the Thunder Bay District Health Unit CEO Janet DeMille. She says though the merging of Ontario's units is expected to save the province up to $200 million, it may be at the cost of public health, especially in this region.
In Northwestern Ontario and the Thunder Bay District Health Unit, we have very significant health issues. And in many ways, we have worse health outcomes than the rest of the province.
Despite the many discussions with the Ministry of Health, the chair of the Thunder Bay District Board of Health, James McPherson, says not only is the impact to the region's communities is still unknown, there's also no clear picture as to how the combined agency will be structured, from governance, administration to funding. He says a major concern is how the new funding model will operate.
The provincial government formerly paid for 100% of many of our programs. That's going down to 70% in 2020. How much that's going to cost and what the impact is per municipality is something we have to figure out, we have to work on before municipalities start the budget process, which is going to be soon.
CEO of the Northwestern Health Unit, Marilyn Herbach, echoes the same concerns. There are 13 offices run by Northwestern in each of its communities, and she says budget changes can have large implications to their services.
If changes happened or budgets were a lot less, we could have to possibly close offices and parachute from larger centers into those communities.
Local consultations are expected to be held over the summer, with changes being implemented by April 2020. Carmen Wong, TBT News.
The long debate over policing in Dryden came to an end, well, at least for now. In May, City Council decided to reject a bid by the OPP to replace the Dryden Police Service. The lone vote in favor of the switch came from Mayor Greg Wilson. Adam Riley has the details.
After 2 years of meetings and consultations, it all came down to this vote by Dryden City Council to either stay with the Dryden Police Service or to have the OPP take over municipal policing duties. But before council voted on the matter, one city resident took to the podium to emphasize the importance of having a municipal police force.
There was a comment that said, it isn't personal, it's business. Well, actually, it is personal. When you put your life on hold for a couple of years and you don't know if you have a job or not. There is a business aspect to this, but you weren't elected to run a business. You were elected to run a community, and your tools that you have to run this community and run its values and its morals are available to you, and DPS is one of those tools.
Gardner finished his speech with the hope that council and later councils would never look at an OPP takeover again. But citing provincial downloading and the city's current and future debt situation, Councillor Norm Bush wouldn't commit to that.
But having said that, I believe we are on the right track to see our financial recovery plan through to conclusion, and if necessary, revisit this issue sometime after 2020.
Bush says there is a potential cost savings of $1 million per year, but Inspector Ann Tachik says that's all it is, potential.
There were no guarantees in any of the reports that were provided by MNP that there was going to be $1 million savings. All of these costs were speculated, they were estimates.
Then it came down to a vote.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Bush, that the City of Dryden rejects the OPP costing proposal.
Final decision 6-1 in favor of the DPS, with Mayor Greg Wilson being the lone holdout. Wilson says it's not fun to be the black sheep, but sometimes leadership means not going along with the group.
As I said in my statement, you have to vote according to your conscience, but you can't. That doesn't mean it's all emotions. It's really studying, looking at the facts. A lot of effort went into studying this by so many people.
Wilson adds another reason for voting against the motion is that a unanimous decision by council could sway future councils if the policing issue were to be revisited again. Adam Riley, TBT News.
Northwestern Ontario faced several major forest fires this year. One of the first caused the evacuation of the First Nation community of Pekanjicum after a fast-growing wildfire threatened that community. The fire broke out on Wednesday, May 29th, and by the 31st had expanded to over 3,000 hectares. The Canadian Armed Forces spearheaded the evacuation using a C-130 Hercules to bring the first evacuees to Thunder Bay. The community has a population of nearly 4,000. Children, the elderly, and residents with breathing issues were transported out first due to the high levels of smoke in the area. Thunder Bay Fire Chief said 250 evacuees would be staying for an indefinite period of time.
What we're looking for right now is to take some of the more vulnerable people out, some of the elderly, young children, families. They say there's fires that we're understanding are close to the community and smoke from other fires that are far away from the community that may be impacting it, and the wind is probably not helping.
I've spoken to mayors from across northwestern Ontario hotel operators that I have close ties with, and we're mobilizing quickly to ensure that these folks have a safe, comfortable place to be while we deal with this emergency. In the community itself, Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of Natural Resources has planes coming in and out of there to deliver fire crews as the community may be at risk, Mr. Speaker. That means soaking down buildings, but as well moving people out. We have every plane possible helping Pikangikum at this time.
Evacuees would later return home after the tragic death of a 16-year-old in Kapuskasing. But the return was short-lived as the fire rebounded in July and residents were forced to evacuate once again. In late May, Canada's Minister of Indigenous Services traveled to Grassy Narrows with plans to sign a memorandum of agreement that never came to form. The agreement Grassy Narrows hoped for was the federal government following through on their promise to deal with the mercury issue once and for all. Some 50 years ago, mercury was dumped in the Wabigoon River, which has led to mass health issues in the First Nation for generations. Corey Nordstrom was in Grassy Narrows and filed this report.
After a 4-hour private closed-door meeting, Indigenous Services Minister Seamus O'Regan and Chief Rudy Turtle emerged without an agreement in place to deal with the long-standing mercury problem in Grassy Narrows.
We have not come to an agreement quite yet, but I think we've got a lot of common ground and certainly the same objectives in mind. So not a whole lot to say other than we're going to keep talking over the next couple of days.
Chief Turtle says he is tired of Band-Aid fixes and wants an agreement that can benefit residents for generations.
Proposal that they put forward was not adequate. It wasn't good enough. And what we've been asking for is more of a specialized care for victims of mercury. But what they've come up with is what they call assisted living. And so those are two different things.
In November of 2017, Ottawa committed to building that care home and treatment facility, but to this day, only 1% of the money for that project has been released. Chrissy Isaacs is fed up with delays and wants action now.
We need that locked so that it doesn't get taken back, and we need that mercury home so our people can have somewhere to go and have the proper treatment.
A media release issued by the ministry stated outright that O'Regan was coming to the First Nation for the signing of a memorandum of agreement. The locals even held an event welcoming the minister with a feast at the school. Hours came and went, with 150 children waiting for a celebratory signing that never took place.
Even though the day's meeting didn't end the way many residents had hoped, some think that by the talks continuing to take place, it means eventually their community can go back to the lifestyles they had before the mercury dumping over 50 years ago.
You know, they just enjoy the outdoors and what's out there, sand beaches and all. You know, all we're doing is trying to preserve, you know, safe water, you know, everything that we have around this area.
When asked about setting a date for the signing, the minister gave no certainties.
Okay, so when can we expect a definitive answer?
Oh, well, I don't know. These things take on a life of their own, but hopefully in the next couple of days.
Corey Nordstrom, TBT News.
When we come back, a community which was forced into isolation a century ago connects back to the mainland. A road for many is just a flat section of ground consisting of gravel, pavement, and paint. But for residents of Shoal Lake number 40, it's a lifeline. For over a century, the community has been cut off from the rest of Canada, but residents and guests can now come and go from the community and with no restrictions after the completion of Freedom Road this summer. Adam Riley was one of the first people to travel Freedom Road and filed this report.
For years, this has been the only way to travel to Shoal Lake number 40 during the summer months. But now the Amic 2 is dry docked permanently after the completion of the aptly named Freedom Road project. For 100 years, the community, which was once a peninsula, has been cut off from the mainland after the city of Winnipeg built an aqueduct to provide drinking water for itself. Ironically, the water in Shoal Lake 40 isn't drinkable. On Thursday, the community wrapped up a 4-day celebration of the road's completion. Chief Erwin Red Sky says the process has been an emotional roller coaster with several bumps along the way.
When you're dealing with 4 jurisdictions and, one minister changes or deputy minister changes, or once you educate one government, then there's somebody else is having an election, and it's just vice versa. It's just a whirlwind of frustration. And finally, we're here, and it's just amazing.
Also in attendance were guests from several jurisdictions, including the federal government, the province of Manitoba, and the city of Winnipeg. Each government contributing to the $30 million price tag on a 50-25-25 split. One of those guests was Federal Indigenous Services Minister Seamus O'Regan, who called the occasion a chance to fix the past.
You have shown what your determination can do. There is a road out there to prove it. Thank you for allowing us to make amends. Thank you for allowing us to turn a corner with you. Thank you for your partnership. Thank you for your friendship.
Freedom Road not only allows residents to come and go as they please, it will also help usher in a brand new era of prosperity for the community, ending a 50-year infrastructure deficit and a 22-year boil water advisory in the form of new houses, a new school, and a new water treatment facility. Kenora MP Bob Nault says those projects are ready to roll.
Well, the funding's in place. As far as I know, the design's in place, and so I think it's all going forward. How long does it take to build? I'd say, ask the question in a year, and I think we'll have everything in place, and the water will be running, and the boil water advisory will be gone.
But until then, residents of Shoal Lake 40 can experience Adam Riley, TBT News.
Adam Cappe, the man whose 4 years of solitary confinement sparked public outrage and debate about the practice in Ontario jails, was arrested not once but twice since his release. The 26-year-old had his first-degree murder charge stayed in January due to 5 years of trial delays and the conditions of his incarceration. In March, he was arrested in Sioux Lookout on a charge of sexual assault with a weapon, followed by a second arrest by Laxville police along with another suspect. Police described this as a home invasion, and Cappe was charged with break and enter, 2 counts of assault, overcoming resistance, and breaching the conditions of his release. There was no word from court officials on whether he was granted release. Coming up after the break, a suspicious death becomes a murder in Fort Frances, and police provide an update on a murder in Dryden. murder case out of Fort Frances that's reminiscent to the Elizabeth Wettlaufer murders in southern Ontario. OPP say a 2015 suspicious death of an elderly woman at the hospital in that community is now considered a murder, and a former nurse has been arrested. The accused 34-year-old Lindsay Coyle was arrested in early August, but later released on bail. The former registered practical nurse was charged with second-degree murder, breach of trust, theft, and more in connection with the death of a 75-year-old Hermina Fletcher. The death occurred in January of 2015 when Coyle was working at the La Ferendre Hospital in Fort Frances. The case changed from a hospital death to one that was considered suspicious after police retrieved information from the hospital. Sergeant Patrina Taylor-Hertz explains.
We received information about a drug discrepancy and began this investigation. It led us to several charges, including second-degree murder. Well, this was a complex investigation, and we took the time necessary to complete a thorough and professional investigation.
Taylor-Hertz says no other information will be made public until the case goes to trial. In August of 2018, Henry Stone Arnold, a 28-year-old Dryden man, disappeared. And after a lengthy search, his remains were discovered just west of the community. Almost 1 year later, Ontario Provincial Police held a press conference in Dryden to update the public on the case, which they now consider a murder. And they announced a $50,000 reward to help solve it. Adam Riley was there and filed this report.
Less than a year after launching an investigation into the death of 28-year-old Henry Stone Arnold, the OPP are reaching out once again for the public's assistance.
We believe there is someone in or from this community who has the information that we need to bring this case to a successful resolution for Henry's family.
So far, the OPP have determined that Stone Arnold was last seen alive on August 8, 2018 at the Husky gas station in Dryden. The next day, his truck, a white four-door Dodge Ram pickup, was located abandoned on a property on Jonasson Road, just off of Highway 594. It was then he was declared missing and a full air and ground search was initiated. Sadly, 8 days later,
OPP officers located what they believe were human remains on a private property on Triss Road in the town of Dryden. At that time, the missing person investigation became a suspicious death investigation.
pathologists transported the remains to Toronto and conducted a post-mortem where they were positively identified as those of Henry Stone Arnold.
As a result of the findings of the post-mortem examination and the evidence collected during the police investigation, it became clear that Henry Stone Arnold was murdered. During this process, it also became clear that Henry's remains were intentionally damaged after his death.
When asked if there was a possible connection between a drug possession arrest in Sioux Lookout involving Stone Arnold, where Xanax and methamphetamine were seized just 10 days prior to his disappearance, Haida was unable to confirm a connection.
Well, Henry's background, of course, has been examined by the investigators, and at this point I can't comment on that.
So there are no suspects at this time?
Well, categorizing somebody as a suspect involves an evaluation of the evidence, and to do that, that's something that I'm not able to do at this point with the media.
Haida says a dedicated tip line for the investigation into the murder of Henry Stone Arnold has been set up in hopes of generating new leads in the case, and he adds a $50,000 reward is being offered for any information that leads to an arrest.
Every tip, every piece of evidence, every piece of information is rigorously followed up.
Adam Riley, TBT News.
An industrial accident west of Marathon claimed the life of one man in August, prompting both the highway to be closed for several hours and the Ministry of Labor to investigate. It happened at a work site along Highway 17 at Angler Creek. OPP say a 61-year-old Sudbury man was pronounced dead at the scene. An investigation team from the MOL was sent to inspect the site and take statements for witnesses. Reports indicate the man was installing a temporary steel bridge when the bridge shifted and pinned him. A crane was brought in to secure the bridge and allow for the recovery of the victim. The ministry says one compliance order was issued against Belanger Construction, based in Chelmsford, Ontario. No details about the order or its impact on the project moving forward were released. And that's all for part 2 of Northwest Newsweek Year in Review. Thanks for watching and stay tuned for part 3.